Scouts Victoria respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Victoria where our activities take place today. We pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging, and continue to recognise and embrace the important continuous history and connection to land and community of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people.
Welcome to Scout Quest. I'm Fred, a first Torquay venturer from Post Werribee as well, Werribee Plains District. Today we are excited to catch up with the sport climbing Olympian Tom O'Halloran, who has recently gotten back from competing for Australia in the 2020 Olympic Games. A dream over 20 years old that came true and created history not for just himself, but for sport climbing in Australia and around the world. Tom started rock climbing at the age of 12 and has represented Australia multiple times throughout his climbing journey. Tom is renowned for not only competing in his years of Olympic Games, but also for his 4 first climbing ascents at a very challenging grade 35, which has only been achieved by a handful of athletes around the world. Let's welcome Tom. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Hey Fred, hey everyone. Thanks for being here and having a chat, and thanks for having me be able to kind of share my experience with you all. It's awesome to be able to share a bit of the psych of rock climbing with everyone, and show you kind of a little bit into my life, I guess, and give you a bit of an insight into the Olympic experience.
Great, let's get started.
Basically, as Fred said in the beginning, I started climbing when I was 12, and it was just family friends basically got us into it. There was a climbing gym that opened up. That was in 2004 in Brisbane, and it's kind of funny to think that climbing has turned into this huge thing, because at the time it was only the second climbing gym in Brisbane, and now there's like they're everywhere, and they're all through Sydney and Melbourne as well. I'm sure a lot of the you Victorians have been to a few of the gyms around the place. It's pretty special sport to find, and so this was one of the climbing wall that we set up at our home in Brisbane. That's me hanging in my harness, and a friend who lived around the corner, and he kind of had been climbing for a little bit longer, and he showed us how to put these holds onto the wall and try and kind of work it out. It was the old garage, and we stuck sheets of plywood onto the wall, and away we went. So I was doing it for a while, and was pretty psyched on the outdoor climbing, and a bit of indoor stuff as well, and got into competitions just due to the fact that there would be a competition running at the climbing gym on the weekend, and rather than going to the kids club program that I was signed up for, it would just be like, oh, we'll go in the climbing competition. And I ended up competing at states and nationals, and that qualified me in the end to represent Australia in 2007 at the World Youth Championships. And that was in Ecuador, which was pretty special. I was 14 years old at the time, and it was pretty rad to be over there, and hanging out with the Australian team. It was the first time that I'd experienced anything like that. It was a pretty wild thing, and I ended up coming 12th there, which was mind-boggling. I had absolutely zero expectations and was kind of just ready to come last, but ended up coming 12th, and that was the best, and I think maybe still is the best result of an Australian. Oh, not anymore actually, but it was for a long time the best result by an Australian youth climber at a World Youth Championships. But I also did a lot of outdoor climbing, and this is down in the Blue Mountains, this photo. I think it was about the same year, so about 2007. And it was something that I got to do with my dad, which was really awesome. My little brother got into it for a little while, but mostly hanging out with my dad and a few other friends, and it was pretty special. And at the time, the Blue Mountains was just kind of this little holiday destination when I was living in Brisbane. but now I've been able to move to the Blue Mountains and called it home for the last 10 years, which is pretty special. But after finishing school, I went to a few different countries. I went to China, and that arch in the background is super duper famous in the kind of Chinese landscape. It's called Moon Hill, as I'm sure you can see why. And it's in an area called Yangshao. And if you've seen the Avatar movies, that the landscape of Yangshao is based. They based that landscape on the Avatar movie, or other way around, confusing it. But yeah, those kind of limestone casts throughout the landscape is the Yangshu landscape. It is a pretty incredible space. I also went to Rocklands in South Africa, which is just an insane space. That's a bouldering area. So climbing up those boulders and just landing down onto the crash pads below you. You hike them up to in place, put them down, and do a bit of climbing, and it's pretty awesome. And a few other places, but this one is very special to me. It's Sayus in the south of France. I've been there quite a few times now, and yeah, it's a pretty special thing being there and climbing on. It's one of the best cliffs in the world, really, this whole area. So yeah, definitely keen to get back there. And there's one particular climb that I really would like to do. I've tried it a few times, but haven't managed to get from the bottom to the top without falling off yet. So need to be a little bit better to do that one day. This is my family on a family climbing trip. There's a really good spot down by the beach near Nowra. And we go down there and we love hanging out at the beach and having a bit of a beached holiday and going climbing as well. And it's a really special thing. My partner also climbs. She's represented Australia at World Cup events, and our daughter's just getting into it. Her name's Audrey, and she's 7.5 years old now. And she's super psyched on doing it. So as I was saying, yep, live in the Blue Mountains now and get to do this sort of stuff on the weekend, and it's pretty fun. It's a pretty wild space, and the Blue Mountains really kind of kicked it off for me for getting away from the competition side of things, because I just loved being there and just doing stuff like this. This is a route that I put up. I was the first one to climb it, and it's a very cool spot. It's about 200 meters high, and you climb it in several what we call pitches. So you climb about 30 meters, and then you get up to a belay, and then you bring your partner up. You can see my partner's down the few meters below me, belaying me, and we're about 150 meters up at this point, and it's a pretty awesome spot. And this is a couple of other little photos of a few bits of climbing that I've done that are 20 minutes from my house, which is pretty awesome. I never knew that it was going to be possible to do that sort of thing growing up in Brizzy, but kind of just kept on going. But in the end, yeah, I did decide to strap up my climbing boots for competitions and try and become an Olympian. It was a dream of mine when I was 8 years old and was watching the Sydney Olympics, the year 2000. And it's the first time I'd ever heard of the Olympics. I just wanted to do it. And I wanted to be able to be good enough at a sport to be able to go and become an Olympian. And it just looked amazing. And rock climbing wasn't an Olympic sport until 2016. When it got announced that it would be at the Tokyo Games. And at that point in time, I wasn't really sure actually if I wanted to compete, because I knew it was going to take a lot of hard work and I was going to have to give up my outdoor rock climbing, which is where I felt really awesome. That was the things that I love to do. But in the end, I decided that I'd try and turn myself into a competition climber, because the styles of climbing are quite different between outdoors and indoors. So it was it's going to take a lot of work and sacrifice, but I was able to do it in the end. And it was a pretty tough battle to get there, both mentally and physically. And there was times that I did want to give up and just go, you know what, like this isn't for me. But I had my partner and a few close friends that were able to give me a lot of support through those tough times, and not necessarily convince me to keep going, but just to support me and just go, hey, you know, what do you need? What can we do to make things better for you at the moment? And if you do pull out, then that's okay. But if you want to keep going, we're here to support. And having that there was awesome. And so I ended up making it to Tokyo and being in the Olympic Village. This was the Australia building in the Olympic Village in Tokyo, and it was pretty awesome. You can see all of the flags and everything everywhere, and all the countries have a bit of a competition to see who can make their building look the best. And this was down the main street of the Olympic Village. All of these buildings, and there's probably 3 or 4 times as many, had Olympians in them. It was a few thousand people there at a time. I think it was about 14,000 athletes across the entire games period, or 14,000 people, you know, with coaches and everything. It was pretty awesome. And this was the Olympic rings. So this is myself in the middle there. Oceana McKenzie in the white t-shirt. She was the female athlete for Australia. And Will Hammersler was our coach and support person while we were there. And this was the view from my balcony down onto that main street. You can see that big tall building in the background there, the big kind of triangle one. We weren't really sure what that was. You can see just underneath it, there's a few little tents and things. That was the bus stop to go and get taken off to the stadiums and where you were going to compete. And there was always a funky smell. Weren't really sure what it was. And a few days in, we found out that was the chimney stack for the garbage incinerator where they burnt everything. So basically, they were just burning a whole bunch of compost and stuff, and that's why it was so stinky. This is my bedroom. Tiny little bed. We got to keep the doona, which was pretty cool. The blanket there. So it's on a shipping container on our way back to Sydney. Hopefully at the moment. We ended up getting so much uniform and stuff that I had to send it back in a shipping container, and some of it's not quite back yet. And the beds were made out of cardboard, which was pretty funny. I'm not sure what they're going to do after that. This is Will and Osh again. This is in the food hall. And we had perspex screens, so these big plastic dividers between us, so that with all the COVID stuff going on, that was their countermeasures, so that when we were taking our masks off, because you had to wear them all the time everywhere, when you were taking your masks off at the dining hall to eat, there was at least some sort of little physical barrier there to help stop things. Didn't have to do my washing for 2 weeks, which was pretty radical. We just put them in these little bags and then took them down to the laundromat. And if you got it in by, I think it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, you'd be able to get them back that afternoon, all lovely, fresh and dry. So that was pretty good. This was the climbing wall. So for a few days before we got into the competition, we were able to go and have some practice days on the climbing walls. We weren't allowed, the routes that we were going to compete on weren't set, but they set other climbs that we could kind of practice and warm up on and climb around on, so you could get used to the feeling of the wall and all that sort of thing. So you can see in the background there's the tall wall. That's the speed climbing wall with the 2 lanes, so climbers can race head to head next to each other there. And what you can see there is the bouldering wall. So we're just climbing up a couple of meters high, and then you're landing down onto the big squishy mats. And that's me in the foreground with my little Ninja Turtles ice vest on. It was so hot over there and so humid that we're using ice vests to try and keep us cool while we were resting. It took your breath away when you put it on, but it felt good once you kind of got that feeling out of the way. And this was the lead climbing wall, and they'd set 4 different routes there for us to have a bit of a climb on and get used to that. So I think it was about just over 15 meters high and about 40 degrees overhung. So quite steep and quite pumpy in your forearms there. And that's another perspective. You can kind of see how steep it is there. And this was the warm-up area in the very back, so that we had the competition area, and then around the back of the climbing wall and kind of out the back on, you'd have to get a little golf buggy to take you around there. This is the official warm-up area. They called it the playground, which was kind of cool. And that's me holding a slushy. They had these crushed ice and Powerade, basically. So there's so much sweating and stuff that you were doing over there, so you needed to take in lots of electrolytes. And the slush puppy kind of slushy thing lets you cool down from the inside out again, and you've got the ice vest on to cool you from the outside in. So hopefully all of it meant that you didn't discombobulate in the heat. One of the funny things though with being a athlete means that you do get drug tested. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, one morning, I got a knock on my door in the apartment. So in my apartment, there was 3 other bedrooms, and each bedroom there was 2 beds, so you'd be sharing. And I got a knock on the door, and it was the World Anti-Doping Organization, or Authority, I think it is, asking for me to go and do a drug test. And so I had to go and do a wee in a cup, and then they go off and test it and make sure that you're not taking any steroids or anything like that to make it unfair. So that it's a clean playing field for everyone that you're competing with and against. And there was a lot of the climbers that were tested. So it's good to know that that they're doing their job, and everyone's staying nice and clean and safe. I'm not sure if many of you know who he was or BMX fans, but Logan Martin was my roommate, or one of my roommates, and he won the gold medal for the BMX, and they were his bikes in our room. Thought it was kind of cool. I got to see his gold medal, and that was pretty sweet. And any skateboarders out there, Shane O'Neill, who was actually a Melbourne boy, he was in the room. We shared the same bed. He left the morning that I came in, and I saw him at the bus stop. And I'm a bit of a Shane O'Neill fan, actually, and I should have asked him for a selfie as he was leaving the security to get on the bus to go to the airport, but I got a bit shy and I didn't, and I regret it now. But yeah, I ended up in his room, which was pretty cool. There was a few things left over with Shane O'Neill written on them. So this is another little bit of a behind the scenes. So that warm-up area out the back of the climbing wall, there was also an indoor area, and you can see the tiny little climbing walls off to the left there. So this is the day of the competition, and there's a few of the athletes there, and a few of the support staff and that sort of thing. Everyone getting geared up, ready for the comp. And this was the beginning of the comp. Yeah, pretty crazy to finally pull on the Olympic uniform and walk out there on competition day, and there's the Olympic rings on a climbing wall, and this is it. I'm competing for Australia. I didn't climb as well as I had hoped I would, but it was absolutely incredible experience all the same. There's a couple of the boulder problems, and yeah, the bouldering, it was quite a struggle. Everyone had a bit of a tricky time. It was quite hot and tricky, and this was the lead climbing wall. You can see the rope just off to the left there. but it was absolutely incredible to be there and compete and represent Australia in this sport that I love and I've done for so long. And that was the bus ride on the way back home. A few of the athletes, everyone going back after the competition. There was a few people that were psyched because they'd made it into the finals, and a few disappointed people that hadn't done as well as they'd hoped. But everyone was pretty excited to have been there and get to call themselves an Olympian now. One of the biggest things with climbing is your skin can get absolutely trashed. So they're my absolutely red, raw, thin fingertips. Basically hurts to pick up a cup of tea at that point, and you just to get enough friction on the holds. It's like grabbing sandpaper and sweating off them, basically. And at a certain point, your skin gets so thin that it starts weeping blood, and it's all a little bit gross. And you got to tape up and make sure you're not spreading blood everywhere. But yeah, that was one night of climbing in the Tokyo heat. Absolutely destroyed my fingers, and they're so sensitive afterwards. And takes weeks to recover. And once you got off the bus on the way back from the competition wall, you had to go through these security checkpoints. They needed to make sure you had no contraband in your bag, and all the police were there with and the military. And then you needed to do COVID tests and all sorts of things to make sure that everyone's nice and safe. And this was the Australia team. This was us going along and watching finals for the men and the women. It was pretty awesome to be there in the flesh and watch the finals go down. And it was absolutely incredible competition. And to be able to sit there and watch was amazing. And they also had, as you can see, the equipment donation. So I put in my climbing shoes, the green ones on the left there, and a bunch of the other athletes put that in. And yeah, then your climbing gear gets to become part of the Olympic Museum, and it's pretty funny to think that maybe one day you can go and check it out and see there'd be some other sports that put their equipment in there. And then it was time to go home, and I ended up in hotel quarantine, and the very first thing that I ordered was a burrito and some chips. It was absolutely delicious. So I was in hotel quarantine in Sydney, which was a little bit tricky. 2 weeks hanging out in a hotel room just by yourself. But I watched a bunch of TV and made some Lego, which was super fun. Made this big combi bus, which I've actually got next to me here. Oh, I just broke it, actually. It's all falling apart. Here we go. Oh. Pretty awesome. Now it's next to me on the desk. Yeah, that's it. That's everything there. Yeah, let's crack into some questions if anyone has anything else that they want to know.
I'll read some questions out from the chat. What was the best part of being in the Olympic Village?
I think probably the best part was just seeing all the other athletes that were there. It was absolutely insane. There's like all these people that like you've seen on TV, and people that you don't even know, and they just look absolutely ridiculous. They've got muscles coming out everywhere, or you see some of the like gymnasts that are super springy and bouncy, and yeah, just to be able to be there and be amongst all of the excitement is, yeah, it was just incredible to be in the middle of it all.
What were the cardboard beds like to sleep on?
They were actually pretty comfy. No, these super technical mattresses and stuff that they had there as well, that made things, you could kind of like flip it in different ways, and it all kind of, you could have like comfy and hard and bumpy and slightly bumpy and not so comfy and all sorts of weird things. So you kind of like fully cater it to to your own sleeping needs.
Oh. What was the hardest type of climbing you had to do at the Olympics? Bouldering, speed, or lead climbing?
I think the bouldering was tricky in the actual competition. That was definitely the hardest round for me. They were just boulder problems that weren't particularly my style, and it just got the better of me on the day. But the hardest thing to train for was the speed climbing for sure. I wasn't a huge fan of the speed climbing, and the training was pretty brutal. But yeah,
Uh, Did you have to prepare for a change in temperature or other conditions?
yeah. So that's one of the big factors going into the Tokyo Games was the heat and the humidity there is absolutely brutal in Japan in summer. So they were predicting 35 degrees and 80% humidity, which is just like rough. And 2 days before I left to fly out, it was snowing at my house. And so the contrast between going from training in the snow to summer is a pretty big shock on your body. So I was doing things like jumping in our bathroom with the heater on, the heat lights, and the shower running to get hot and steamy, just to get used to being like, oh, hot and bothered. And training in jumpers and thermals and all sorts of other, like way too much clothing to try and get used to performing and being uncomfortably hot. And we also needed to try some nutrition stuff as well.
Um, Did you get to attend a closing or opening ceremony? Was it amazing?
Unfortunately, I was not able to. Due to the COVID stuff, you could only fly in up to 7 days before your event, and you had to fly out within 24 hours. And so our competition sat kind of towards the end, which meant that I flew out after the opening ceremony and flew out of Sydney after the opening ceremony and flew out before the closing ceremony. So it was a little bit of a bummer, because that was one of the things I remember from the 2000 games was watching that opening ceremony, and it's iconic, the opening ceremony of all the Olympics. But I still got to go, which was the main thing. But it was pretty awesome to watch on TV. Just
Did you get,
experienced it like everyone else.
sorry, cut you off on accident. Did you get to choose your roommates?
No choosing. You just showed up, and that's it. It was what it was. I was kind of lucky to not have anyone in the second bed in my bedroom. So it was just me, which was pretty cool. So it meant that I could just wake up when I wanted to, and you can just have your own space in there and a little bit of quiet within the chaos of everything. But the BMX dudes, there was two of them in there. So there was Logan and the fella that was doing like the race. I can't remember his name. And next door to me in the other bedroom were the two shooters.
Oh. How often do you train, and do you train the same amount for all of the disciplines?
Yeah, so I was doing 21 training sessions a week in the lead up to the Olympics. So that breaks down to 7 days, and yeah, 3 training sessions each day. Each of them takes from 1 to 3 hours, or maybe a little bit more. And it was a pretty even spread between all 3 disciplines. A lot of the strength training components were relevant for all 3 of the disciplines, but there was definitely like a legs day for the speed climbing, and there was 2 speed climbing sessions actually on the speed climbing wall, and bouldering, where I'm going to the bouldering gym and doing that, and the same for the lead. So yeah, it was a pretty even spread. It was tricky because I live up in the Blue Mountains. It's an hour and a half at best to get down to the nearest climbing gym for me. So they were pretty big days driving up and back to Sydney.
Are you now training for Paris and targeting your strongest disciplines? Now speed will be a separate discipline?
Yeah, that's definitely pretty awesome to have speed climbing in its own thing. I think not only for the competitors like myself that just enjoy the lead and the bouldering, but it also means that there's proper dedicated speed specialists, and we didn't get to see them unfortunately at this Olympics. So we'll get to see them in Paris, and that'll be absolutely amazing. Like, to see the best speed climbers in the world going head to head for an Olympic medal will be absolutely insane. And I'm looking forward to training being quite a bit easier, taking speed climbing out.
What is some advice for people who want to get better at climbing?
There's a couple of things that are pretty easy to do. One is just go climbing more. And it might be tricky at the moment in lockdowns and that sort of thing. But like when I was little, I was climbing up the door frames and then hanging onto the top of the door jamb. Go climbing in the trees in the backyard. Like, I didn't discover climbing until I was 12, and then didn't really take it seriously for a really long time. I was just going and playing basically. And I never would have dreamed that I would get to where I was, but I always just loved doing it and just wanted to do more and more and more. So I think that's such a big thing. And also just go and learn from people that, like, watch what other people are doing that are better than you. And also watching what, maybe isn't such a good thing to be doing. You can see, poor technique and those sorts of things. But yeah, just take it all in and learn. There's lots of really great books out there to learn how to do it, and lots of great videos on YouTube and that sort of thing as well. Just take it all in, be a little sponge.
From Ava, what was it like being one of the first athletes to not just represent Australia, but a new sport entirely?
It was pretty surreal, like totally, totally, totally strange and weird and incredible. And I still don't know if it's really sunk in what it actually means. Um, yeah, it's pretty awesome. I when I finally got through and qualified at our Oceania selection event, I cried tears of joy, and it's just, yeah, felt pretty amazing. And then to be there and to see the little Olympic rings covered in chalk was pretty cool.
When you competed, did you use a favorite or lucky harness or a new one that you got especially for the Olympics?
I did think about bringing some. I do like having my little Lucky Charms and stuff like that. But yeah, it was pretty much all fairly new gear. The climbing shoes, especially, you sort of needed things that were pretty fresh and ready to perform. The one thing that I did have that wasn't brand new was my chalk bag strap, which is just like this little bit of webbing with a buckle in it, but it's been on so many of my chalk bags so far, and it felt like it was going to be nice to take all the sweat and training sessions that strap had endured, and take that with me onto the wall. I haven't they're still here. I haven't washed them yet. They're my pants and my shirt. They're probably pretty stinky now. They haven't been washed since the beginning of August. I need to work out what I'm going to do with them. Kind of want to save the little stickers. Yeah, they're pretty stinky.
What's your favorite place to outdoor climb in Australia?
Oh, yeah, definitely the Blue Mountains. It's pretty special. I can walk 800 meters into my backyard, and I'm at some of the best climbing in the world. Some of the areas down in Victoria are amazing as well. Tasmania, like Australia's got such good climbing. This climbing in southeast Queensland is awesome. Over in Western Australia, we're pretty spoilt here. So yeah, there's definitely lots of really good options if anyone wants to get into a bit of outdoor climbing down in Victoria as well. Around the Snowies is really good as well. Mount Buffalo and that stuff.
What's next for Tom?
Oh, once lockdown ends, I'm very keen to go surfing. I miss the beach. Lots of outdoor climbing. I missed my fix on the outdoors with all the indoor focus for a while. So yeah, definitely getting into a lot of my outdoor projects and just going out and doing that sort of thing, and also just catching up on time with my family. It's been pretty amazing to have some free time again, like to not be spending 40 hours a week training and then all the other hours I'm just too tired to do anything else. So yeah, it's pretty awesome to just kind of feel like a normal person again and do dad and family stuff and go out and go rock climbing. And if I don't feel like training, I don't need to train. I can kind of just chill for a little bit, but I'm pretty hungry to get back into it all again soon.
Well, that was our last question. So thank you for joining us today. I'm sure that everyone at home loved hearing about your sport climbing journey and your experiences at the 2020 Olympic Games. They were super motivating to hear.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Fred. It was awesome. Nice chatting with you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. Make sure you check out Scout Quest website page for upcoming events at the link on screen now. And if you have any ideas for Scout Quest, please send any ideas to marketing@scoutvictoria.com.au. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.